All right, welcome back everyone to the third part of part two, our last section on the cycle of phases and aspects. And what we're going to look at in this last section is determining aspects to the nodal axis. We looked at this slide yesterday, but now we're going to actually put some examples in. And in evolutionary astrology, we always start with the planet and we move in a clockwise motion towards the nodal axis, both north node, south node. And we move reversing through the zodiac and the houses because that is the mean motion the moon's nodes move in 90% of the time. And so in the examples that you see here in your chart, we're looking at the nodal axis relationship with Uranus. So we start with Uranus, and with that inner circle moving all the way around, reversing, we get to the south node and see that the south node is making a gibbous opposition to Uranus. When we look at the north node in Uranus, we start with Uranus and we move all the way around the circle to the north node, and it is making the balsamic conjunction to Uranus. If the north node was 19 degrees 9, it'd be exact to Uranus. If the north node was 18 degrees Gemini, it'd be a new phase conjunction. And so one of the things that you learn in looking at aspects with the nodal axis to planets is you learn to visually see it just the opposite way. And over time, it is something that you can do. It's just a matter of training the brain cells to see things just the opposite of what you do with the planets. So we're going to jump right in with some examples. First of all, let's review planets square the nodes, because in evolutionary astrology, when a planet is square the nodes or in orb of it, applying or separating, it means that both nodes have been active in past lives. We look at the south node as the ego from the past. We typically look at the north node as the ego that the soul is creating in this lifetime. However, when a planet is square the nodes, it means that the north node has been involved in the past life patterning just as much as the south node. So in this example here with Pluto square the nodes, we would actually start with Pluto at 1600 Virgo, and we reverse through the houses until we get to the nodes. And here you see that the node is at 2212 Gemini. This going backwards is less than 90 degrees. So the north node is a crescent phase, first quarter square to Pluto. The south node is 3/4 of the way around, a disseminating phase, last quarter square to Pluto. So these are applying squares with Pluto. The purple line that you see here is actually where the nodes are at. If the nodes are on this blue line, 16 degrees, it'd be exact squares. If the nodes were the green line and hanging out at 12 degrees, Gemini Sag, it would be separating squares. Now, the reason because the mean motion of the nodes is reversing through the zodiac retrograde. When a planet is square the nodes, we look for what's called the resolution node, which is the way out of that planetary energy being stuck and skipping, as we call it, back and forth between the nodes, not evolving that planet and its archetype. So we look for the resolution node. It is, you start with the planet, you reverse through, and the very first node you come to is what we call that resolution node. It becomes the bottom line of how those skip steps will get resolved. So I am going to show you an example here. And so we're going to look at this in this next chart right here, which is Veronica's chart. And the planet that is square the nodes is Neptune. All right. Neptune is here at 536 Capricorn in the first house. If we start reversing through the zodiac or houses, the first node we come to is the resolution node, south node. And the south node is at 2 degrees Libra, 11 minutes. Its angle to Neptune is 93 degrees and 25 minutes. So the south node is in a last quarter square to Neptune. First quarter square, excuse me. North node is in a last quarter square to Neptune. Now, when Neptune is square the nodes, we will typically see, again, skip steps with the archetype of Neptune. As we have looked at in the last 2 days, Neptune ruling Pisces in the 12th house, just right off the bat when the planet is Neptune, one of its archetypes is confusion. And the purpose of confusion is to dissolve what is no longer working in our world. Neptune is loosely known as the collective conscious and unconsciousness, the totality of conscious unconsciousness. Another word for that would be source energy. Neptune is the archetype in the chart that is closest to representing God Goddess in any soul, and how we are trying to personally merge with source, co-create with source. So when Neptune is square the nodes, there are skip steps in doing that. There's skip steps in our confusion of understanding source energy. There is skip steps in our path of merging with source, understanding source. Neptune, being the last of the 12 archetypes, though, can imitate, act out any of the 11 archetypes that came before it. So you would want to start to look at where Neptune is by sign and house to then understand where some of that confusion is, or how Neptune is manifesting in this person's chart. And here again, we see Neptune in Capricorn and in the first house. The Neptune in Capricorn generation is an interesting phenomena because Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. Neptune is formless and Saturn is form. It's what Jeffrey Green will call the divine discontent. Why can I not make things manifest, Capricorn, as I want to? Because Neptune, one of its archetypical lessons, is recognizing that we are not the source of anything. We are a channel for source to come through us. I will, my will, divine will. What would you have me know, source? Neptune and Capricorn, what would you have me do, source? Capricorn can also depress that Neptune archetype. We don't look at it. We don't consider it. I've got to get into the grind of the physical world, Capricorn, rather than look at what's behind any manifestation, Capricorn. Now, we also have Neptune in the first house. We have half of Neptune in Aries, and that becomes highly personalized. What does source mean for me? It's not something that we will necessarily learn from somebody else. It's a first house energy I have to experience. I have to have my direct relationship with source. I can be confused about myself, first house. I can sometimes, first house, think that I am superhuman, but I can also bring out all that insecurity of the cardinal modality, and I am less than or under human. We can go back and forth and we can have confusion around that stuff with Neptune. If we look at where the nodes are, South Node Libra 10th, North Node Aries 4th, we can have a soul who has lifetimes of confusion about relationship with itself, North Node in Aries, relationship with others, South Node in Libra, relationship with family and mother, North Node, fourth house, relationship with father or authoritarian parent, South Node in the 10th. There can just be all of this, you know, various forms of confusion around, I don't know how to be in a relationship. Neptune square the nodes with sometimes in general and specifically with the nodal axis in Libra Aries can project ideals out there onto that partner. As we say, make them the de facto God. And then have all the disillusionment and disappointment when, partner falls off pedestal and turns out to be that human being. There's skip steps for this soul in taking responsibility for their own life and in nurturing it. And so we can go back and forth between lifetimes of just being, mm, nose to the grindstone and just plugging away in that material, physical world with not any understanding of, energy creates form, or I don't have time for those, more subtle, deep processing opportunities because it's just got to work. But we could also have the nodal axis in the north node, lifetimes of I don't want to grow up, I don't want to be adult. And so we might have the confusion between being the parent and the child, but we are trying to figure out how to be a maturing adult. And so the way out of the confusion, the resolution node, south node, all right, the soul is having to go back to the past, south node, and revisit issues around relationships, Libra, and revisit issues around the family of origin. And if it is father's the authoritarian parent, which is what her environmental conditioning say, revisit those issues with the father figure and look at how it has so conditioned her in this lifetime in relationships with men as an adult. So it can be her turning towards source as the ultimate father rather than substituting, older, more powerful men and then wondering why she's so pissed off and angry at it. Neptune can be unconscious anger. We deny and we project. All right, let me bring volunteer in. I'm going to pause for a moment and say feedback on that.
Yeah, I feel like everything you said was on spot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let me
Yeah.
ask you a question,
Mhm.
if I may. You didn't mention anything about children. Have you had desire for children?
I do, yes.
Okay. Sometimes with the nodes in the fourth, 10th, and a planet square the nodes from fourth, 10th, there can be lifetimes where you had to be the de facto parent,
Mm.
or, lifetimes where loss of children or, karma with children. And, I have that. Okay. I never had any biological children. And I realized when I went through the past life regression work of deep memory processing, if I don't have a kid, I can't lose it.
Mm.
And, lifetimes of the child that, dies on me or is,
Mm.
taken from me. So I was curious about that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So
Mm. Thank
you
you.
you see with, for yourself, Neptune in the first, to really have a, you know deeper relationship with source energy, You have to do that directly and consciously
Mhm.
yourself.
Mhm.
Neptune in Capricorn, you can't, I mean, it's not about avoiding it or pretending like it doesn't matter. You've got to take responsibility, Capricorn, for your own direct relationship with Source. And
Mhm.
as you do that, then that allows you to go over to that South Node and look at the past with Father from a more objective way. Libra, that balance, okay? And
Mhm.
sometimes Libra brings in the need to be able to be objective between myself and another as well.
Mhm.
And then that allows you to heal from the past so that you can then go forward and develop that North Node ego for yourself on deep emotional levels and healing emotionally all of that Scorpio wounded betrayal of trust energy. And
Mhm.
so rebirthing that relationship with Source to then allow you to move forward and have a healthy relationship with a maturing adult.
Right.
No father substitute.
Yeah.
No wounded bird that you can control, which is the, another archetype that could go on here.
Mhm. I feel, like from both my father and mother, like I wasn't receiving the support that I needed, and basically, it felt to me like with all that Scorpio energy, I was from, being very little, like I was sort of like left alone with that. And there was, and I didn't have any understanding from, either of my parents' side. So it was, I think it was more like through, then through intimate relationships, it was more like I was seeking for that security.
Hmm.
Um, but I mean, but that doesn't work either. And I feel, like that was like I said yesterday, it was almost like it was almost ironic. Like I had a series of relationships where there was basically like I knew if I was with that man, then I didn't have to, worry about any existential problems till the end of my life. But also like what you said about children, what you asked me if I wanted any, like I always knew that if I had children with that man, like I would be basically like locked into the relationship, and I knew that the relationship, like on a deep level, I knew those relationships weren't the right relationships for me. So and now I'm actually getting to that point where I'm, when I'm starting to realize that I have to claim my own independence first.
Hmm. You mentioned it. Neptune and Capricorn square the nodes with Libra Aries. If I am in a relationship with an older successful person, I don't have to take responsibility for myself. Everything's
Exactly.
taken care of for me.
Exactly.
Another archetype with the Neptune square the nodes in Libra Aries is unconsciously seeking exit points in relationships to have your freedom.
Yes.
So committing South Node Libra to an extent, and as soon as it is too much, exposing too much vulnerability,
Mhm.
race over to the independence of the first house. And then you
Mhm.
get so lonely, you jump back in. And back and forth
Yeah.
and back and forth. And so this Neptune signature is, I ultimately remember what I said earlier about Neptune Pisces 12th house. Ultimate freedom means accepting ultimate responsibility for
Right.
yourself, and
Mhm.
that's your Neptune signature. You know.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, questions with this Neptune square the nodes? Any questions from you? Any questions from anybody else who's watching? All right. Well, thank you, volunteer.
Thanks so much, Kim.
Hmm. Hmm. So let's look at the next one here. And in this case, we are going to look at Pluto and the nodes. And so this volunteer has Pluto at 2 degrees Libra retrograde in the end of the sixth house. If we start with Pluto and go reversing through the zodiac, the first node we come to is the South Node at 520 Leo, and its angle to Pluto is 42 degrees and 27 minutes. So it is literally halfway between the um, new phase Nouvelle aspect and the new phase semi-square aspect. If we start with Pluto and we go all the way around the circle to the north node, its angle with Pluto is 222 degrees, 27 minutes. And so it is just shy of, well, it is making the full phase semi-square to Pluto. And so it's, again, it's almost like you take that cycle of phases and aspects and flip it, hold it in the mirror. And again, that's where that differential listing can be helpful for you and figuring this out. Now, in evolutionary astrology, Pluto's the soul. Pluto by sign, the generation you were born into. Pluto by house, the where your soul is coming from for security reasons on the deepest soul levels. This early Pluto Libra generation, her soul is just moving through or into working on relationship lessening. Now, for me, Libra brings in the intimate partner, but Libra square Cancer Capricorn. So there's also lessons with the familial relationships and lessons with work and career relationships as well. But Pluto's in the sixth house, so here's a Virgo soul that is really end of the sixth house, finishing up these lessons of humanizing the soul from an egocentric to a socialized content in the world. And because I'm the Pluto and Virgo generation, I share these lessons generationally, and there's a wide archetype. We'll see if we can bring a few things in for this. But the South Node is the ego of the past that the soul created in order to know itself. The soul has lessons going to the opposite archetype of Pluto, which is the 12th house and Aries. And then those evolutionary intent lessons via the opposite of Pluto, that is also furthered via the development of the North Node, which is the ego striving to be created. And so South Node, coming off of the new phase Noville and just heading into that crescent semi-square, there has the Noville side could have been helping you really recognize things about yourself. South Node Leo, fifth house. And then as it's moving into that crescent phase, but it's still a new phase, yang energy, yang semi-square. There is, I've got to be me. I've got to be me. And relative to being, a sixth house Pluto, well, who is that? And relative to it being 2 degrees Libra, well, who is that? Who am I? Who am I? And so the Libra, there's a lot of compare and contrast with others. And how come they wear that, so well? And I don't know that from me. There's a newness of the soul that is wanting to come out generationally from this ego that and it's wanting the ego from the past to have a maturing. It doesn't want that distortions of South Node Leo fifth house energy in which bottomless pit you have to do, nothing but love me all the time. And no matter how much you give me, partner, it's not enough. The gestation is you learning to love yourself with this archetype. It's the maturing of self love that is coming to a crisis with the waxing semi square that we're in the midst of. And so, North Node is then making a same aspect when we are looking at, let me do this for you to help everybody. When we are looking at Pluto, that Pluto polarity point, sometimes we'll just, go in here and say, okay, the PPP. and we will compare the planets to the polarity point, just like we compare them to Pluto. We'll compare the nodes to the Pluto polarity point. So this is where the ego is striving to go, or the soul, excuse me, is striving to go. It is striving, the Aries generational lessons. I must find myself on a soul level. I must be me. And then that tail end of the 12th house. And yet, well, I just want to be me and I want to know myself. The tail end of the 12th house, think that balsamic energy. But I also have to know myself on deep levels, not only in relationship to people, but into relationship to source as well. Virgo souls can be the busybodies, the workaholics that are really procrastinations. And one of the things that a Virgo soul has to do with the 12th house polarity point is really learn how to simplify and prioritize life, to bring everything into wholeness, to then know where to put energy in action. Now, if we start with this, the North Node is making that same 42.5 degrees aspect to the evolutionary intent. So while we're trying to find who we are, distinct and unique in the broad universe, and always deepening our universal understandings within deepens our knowledge of knowing who we are. The ego we are striving to create then is to be more and more aware of the universe and society, Aquarius 11th house, other people, other groups, to be more and more aware of it and where I fit in with them and where I do not. Remember that individualization process of Aquarius and the 11th. And that North Node is then saying, I've got to be me and I've got to be uniquely who I am. Pluto at the end of that 6th house, depending on various environmental conditionings, and I'm, looking at some of your things. This could be a soul who's had lifetimes of, I got to sacrifice myself for everybody else. And that creates that frustration of got to be me. But it also at the end of the 6th house is saying, I got to start getting this equality thing. And I got to start, seeing it, living it, practicing it. And as I hold those healthy boundaries in all my relationships, that allows me that freedom to be me. And it allows me that freedom to be different. And it allows me that freedom in being different to evolve and change relationships, however necessary for the evolution of my soul. Let me pause at this point so I can, just say, or give feedback, volunteer. Following this, does it work for you?
It does. It's a lot of things to hold, and I can see all of those component pieces And yeah, like from my point of origin, when I grew up in a farm, I didn't put in my description. I mean, I hated it. I felt like it was that sacrifice of all of my freedom, growing up in that sense of origin, and I could not wait to leave, because I needed to find that sense of freedom. Because even though I didn't have religious conditioning, my parents were very much, you work hard and it's not about you at all. And so I think I can see where there's been that big push to find out who I am.
Oh, sorry, I muted myself to clear my throat. Yes, I hear you. I'm working with that interpretation, but I just noticed I made a mistake, so I want to clarify. I got you mixed up with someone else. So I'm going to go with the interpretation. However, I was wrong with the degrees for you. This is 63.5 degrees. This is the waxing sextile, not the Noville semi-square. So my apologies there. We're getting to the end of the workshop and I didn't catch that detail. So the waxing sextile it's crescent phase. It kind of eases off some of that frustration that I was wanting to say with the semi-square. But that waxing sextile, if I remember, it's choice points, choices to evolve, and choices to resist evolution. That's what I have to do a little bit of shifting in regards to the principles that we were just talking about. If it was the 45-degree mark, there'd be more pressure to change. At that 60-degree mark, again, Pluto to the south node, 63.5. Pluto polarity point to the north node, 63.5 degrees. At the waxing sextiles for those, you have the choice to procrastinate making the changes in the relationships of your life. And so crescent phase, you're going to want to, make that effort, make that will to stand up, to create these changes you want to say you want in relationships. So I got to make that little adjustment as my Pluto Virgo notices a detail. Sorry about that, but makes sense, volunteer?
Yeah, it makes sense. And it makes more sense because I can definitely see my procrastination sometimes in making change. Very strong.
Yeah, it's more than just that Pluto Libra, for whatever reasons why, your ego of the past is having a new relationship with your soul. There still has reached a, mini comfort level of the sextile. And so I've done some growth, but I don't know if I'm going to push myself to grow further like I really need to do, crescent phase. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So now my next one, and I'm going to pay attention here. So in this one, I was going to use, this is the example that Pluto to the south node is the 42.5, and it's between the new phase Novelle and the new phase semi-square. So we'll just go with Pluto again, okay? And we'll go with these same degrees for you, and you'll start to see hopefully the difference in the two charts and interpretation. So in this case, okay, hold on just a second here. Gotta press it. Okay. So in this case, we have a fourth house Pluto at about 25 degrees Leo. Reversing through the signs and the houses, we come to the south node at about 13 degrees Cancer in the second house. And again, in this case, we actually have an angular separation of 42 and a half degrees. So the aspects that I was speaking to and misspeaking to in the last chart are what we are going to be here. So coming off of this Noville aspect, the ego of the past is really recognizing a gestation with its soul of wanting to evolve and grow. And relative to the Pluto in Leo generation and a South Node in Cancer, both of those are going to bring in some degree of emotional maturation for your soul and your ego. And as it is approaching that semi-square, it's just 2.5 degrees from it, you're, feeling that tension of wanting to change and yet almost wanting to be emotionally secure and stable. Whereas in the chart before at that 60 degrees, I've grown so much, and now I can just choose to hang out or procrastinate or resist. You, with that South Node in Cancer second, want to do that, but the aspects of the South Node to the Pluto, to your soul, won't let you. Emotional energy builds up that then new phase semi-square has to come out. And then as that comes out, as you emote or, let loose or rage, no judgments here. As that emotional pressure builds up, and again, coming off of a fourth house Pluto in addition to Pluto Leo. So as that emotional energy, builds up until comes out, however, afterwards, then you can settle back into some type of equilibrium, South Node in the second, that will help you feel a sense of some stability again. Now, I remember, Volunteer, where you had said that every time you get aspects to that moon in Sag, it just really kind of shakes you up and unnerves you in some degrees. Well, I don't know how I did that, but we'll let that go. It's more than just that moon in Sag. It is also, as we're just explaining here, with your Sol Pluto signature and your South Node signatures. Can you see that now? With, again, South Node approaching that new phase semi-square aspect to Pluto?
Mm-hmm.
That
Yes.
is a
And I
lot.
understand about the rage building because I keep it tamped down, and then because I don't know what to do with it, I don't know how to let it out. And it's that's one of the things I think that affects my physical health as well, because I keep so much in and then it explodes.
Yeah, and that's part, that's the second house energy. That's that fixed earth energy of, half a South Node in Taurus. And so it would be helpful as you start to feel those emotional triggers that build up, because moon rules Pluto, by soul, Cancer soul, and moon rules South Node by sign. What you could do with this ruler over here, the moon, is, okay, why do I feel this way emotionally? Who's triggering me emotionally? What's triggering me emotionally? What are the emotions going on, self? And just
And
start talking to your emotional body. And that'll start that process of moving those emotions up and out, rather than, that's using that Noville of the 40 degrees, okay, rather than waiting for the pressure of the 45 degree semi-square to explode. Make sense?
okay. And that's before, when you said things just kind of happen to me. That's on. I have learned when stuff is conjuncting my moon, like especially Mercury. It's just like my world kind of explodes, falls apart.
And again, I have learned to watch for that so I can be better prepared. But for a long time, I just like, what the heck happened there?
Well,
It,
moon is strong in your chart because it rules your soul on an individual level. And then it also has half rulership of your ego.
mm-hmm,
So, you've got all that oversensitivity, from the soul's intent. We have to go over to that polarity and evolve. But when we go over to that polarity, which in your case is the 10th house, okay, taking charge
mm-hmm.
of your life psychologically, emotionally, as you do that, then it will evolve that natal Pluto, and you have that emotional maturation that leads to emotional self-reliance. Again,
Yeah,
I
I've had,
rely on
yeah.
myself. Yep. And so, you know, as I have said, doesn't matter what your chronological age is, honey. We're always a work in progress. And
Well, I had to grow up sometime.
and so, you can spend your life, working for your emotional well-being, your emotional peace, your emotional self-responsibility, maturation.
Because as a child, I could be very emotional. I remember
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
just,
Yeah. Yeah, and I could see the emotion sometimes raging out because being the oldest only girl with 7 younger brothers and the de facto mom to them, when do I get to feel? When do I get my
mm-hmm.
emotional needs met? And so on that soul level, this was your choice, so that you would, evolve to this point of going, okay, now I have to mother and nurture myself.
Yeah. And the other thing about Sagittarius moon that I found or remember is that I would just go herring off on different directions. Just never didn't think ahead of what I was doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That spark of fire that just off we go. So I'm just not doing every aspect. I'm just trying to give a couple examples of showing how
Yep.
the nodes compared to the planets. So
Well, that explains some of it now.
yeah, 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 yeah. Thank you, volunteer. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yes. So let's finish up with our last couple of slides and here. And so, as I had said, I use transits, progressions, and solar arcs. And for anybody listening, we know the transits are where they're moving in the skies right now today. Progressions are secondary or major progressions, which we commonly know as a day for a year. For every year of your life, we move those planets one day forward in the ephemeris. Solar arcs or directions are a degree for a year. Solar is sun, arc is movement. Sun moves 1 degree a year. Solar arcs, we move every planet 1 degree a year. The configuration of aspects in your chart stays the same. It slides with solar arcs. And get this, a degree a year at 45, every planet is going to make a semi-square to itself natally. At 60, every planet is going to make a waxing sextile to itself. You can bring in the noville, the septile, quintile at 72. I love working with solar arcs. I've always worked with all 3 of them equally. And I allow solar arcs and progressions to have about a 3-year window of influence: the year before, the year of, the year after. Exceptions is the progressed moon, which moves too fast, and sometimes, Mercury and Venus, when they're moving full speed ahead by, progression, they won't have that long of a influence. And so we always consider the natal planet or the natal point in space, like the node or the ascendant, the starting point. And with forecasting planets, we compare them to that natal point, that 0 point, in a counterclockwise manner, okay? Moving forward through signs and houses. And if we're working with the forecasting nodal axis, we move that in a clockwise movement, reversing through the signs and the houses. My two examples here are collective ones, because I thought I would point out to you all of the energy going on in the United States and our country right now. So here again is Donald Trump's natal chart. And remember me telling you we're going to have a Mars retrograde this fall. Mars is in Aries from September 9th through November 14th. No, excuse me, I back that up. Mars is in Aries June 17th, just around the corner. Mars in Aries, June 17th through January 6th. We have Mars in Aries for 6 months, the second half of the year. More wild energy with this 2020 stelliums of Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto. The Mars retrograde is May 9th through November 14th. Mars turns retrograde at 28 Aries, back to 15 Aries. So here is mid-October when we have the Mars retrograde opposition to the Sun, which is the halfway point of the cycle. And oh, by the way, it so happens at this Mars-Sun opposition that Mercury's going to turn stationary retrograde in Scorpio. I think we have Mercury retrograde in the U.S. election. I wanted to point out some of these aspects in Donald Trump's chart. Uranus literally goes stationary direct within a minute or two of making a last quarter square to his Pluto. Let me explain this to you. So we would let me get my little thing out again. Here's natal Mars, 10 degrees Leo here in the 12th house. We move counterclockwise through the signs in the zodiac to transiting Mars. Or excuse me, transiting Uranus. And you can see as we look at this one, it's about 269 degrees, but Uranus again goes retrograde in August sometime, exactly in a last quarter square to Donald Trump's chart. Crises in consciousness and beliefs that Uranus in Taurus is bringing to his soul. And the Uranus in Taurus generation, or the Uranus in Taurus transit, excuse me, it's about, from periodically, I saw that on that little thing flash up. So yes, I'll address that question. Okay. Let me give the forecasting and then I'll come back to it. The Uranus in Taurus transit for all of us over a 7-year time period is periodically going to undermine security, Taurus. Look at what's happened with the virus, undermining food, clothing, shelter, and, the job market all over the world. Undermining that, and the intent is to find a deeper inner level of security. Now, in the consensus world with Uranus in Taurus, security is our stuff. And I'm wondering if he might not have some legal issues that really start to expose his resources. I mean, the refusal to let go of his businesses as president, the refusal to share his tax return so people can see all his financial information. I also will see this personally for Donald as an extreme frustration, especially if the polls show him continuing to fall behind Joe Biden. The frustration of Uranus, Pluto, in that I can't control things, and so what will he do to try and have the control, the power Taurus. I'm right, you're wrong. So this looks to be an interesting aspect. As we can see, the Mars retrograde, it's going to go over his Jupiter, uh, opposes Jupiter 3 times. Who will he choose to fight with? And then Neptune transiting here in Pisces in the 7th house is squaring the nodes. It is, if we start with the moon, Neptune is making first quarter squares to the moon. Okay. If we start with Uranus up here, Neptune is making last quarter squares to Uranus. Again, progressions are a day for a year. You move every planet one day forward in the ephemeris for each year of your life. Solar arcs, a degree for a year. You move every planet 1 degree forward for each year of your life. Now, the computer software does most of this for us these days. This Neptune squaring the nodes here for Trump. Neptune made the last quarter squares to Uranus last year, 2019. This year, squaring his nodes. I think his moon too. Don't quote me on that. And then we're going to go into 21 and 22. Neptune's going to last quarter square his sun 5 times. So it'll be real interesting to see where he is if this is after the election, win or lose. He's going to have a nodal axis return October 29th. The presidential election is November 3rd. See the transiting nodes right here at 2159. His natal nodes are 2048. So he's getting ready to have his 4th nodal axis return, about an 18 and a half year cycle by transit around here. You're welcome, sweetie. So this nodal axis return for the 4th time, the big question, I guess, will all his lies come home to haunt him? What's starting to kind of circulate here in the United States is the literal exhaustion that we have with this gentleman, and people just going, I don't know if I can handle him for 4 more years. And then let me just move on because I'm seeing where we've got a little bit of technical difficulties. And then the United States, the July 4th chart, I use the 2:13 a.m. But if you are familiar with the Sag rising, they call it the Sibley chart. Look at what the 5 outer planets on your screen are doing in the U.S. natal chart for July 4th, no matter what time you use. Some of you might be aware that the U.S. for the first time is going to have Pluto, transiting Pluto, in the last 250 years, has went all the way around this circle, and it's coming back to have its first soul return as a country. Before that, though, Pluto is in process right now of making 5 oppositions to Mercury. The United States has a Mercury-Pluto opposition natally. These are the only 2 planets that are retrograde. It's part of that battle between inclusive versus exclusive that is the soul of our country. I just call the Gemini rising chart Gemini rising. There are those that use the 5:10 p.m. on July 4th, and that creates a Sag rising or Sagittarius rising. That's called commonly the Sibley chart because some gentleman, somebody Sibley, put in his diary that the signing was late afternoon on the 4th of July. So those are 2 commonly used charts in regards to the US. But in addition to that, okay, look at what Saturn is doing. Saturn is making 3 conjunctions to Pluto this year. You see your lower right screen. And transiting Jupiter in Capricorn is making 3 oppositions to the natal Mercury this year, 2020. So we're already in the intensity of Pluto, transiting Pluto, balsamic natal Pluto. We're already in the intensity of the death and rebirth of the soul, of everything that has come in this country for the last 250 years. You know, all of the racial discriminations that started with Native Americans, you know, the black slavery, people of color, the whole immigration issue, all of that stuff is just so much in the air right now. And then in addition to that, transiting Neptune up here in Pisces, it's going to go stationary retrograde in a couple of weeks at 20 Pisces 58 minutes. Exactly last quarter square Mars. You start with Mars, you go 3/4 of the way around to transiting Pluto. It is making an exact last quarter square to the Mars 1 minute off. Neptune is going to stand on that last quarter square, crises in consciousness, literally through the month of June. And look at what we have going on. We also will have, and it's going to make 5 of these last quarter squares, okay, 2 retrograde cycles. And then in 2021, Neptune's going to have an opposition to itself. Now, this Mars last quarter or crescent phase, or excuse me, disseminating phase square to Neptune is another one of those include versus exclude. Mars in Gemini, the Neptune in Virgo, all of the religious criticism. And the Sun making the disseminating square natally to Saturn in Libra is also Saturn in Libra, fairness and balance or the lack of it. So we have major aspects in this chart, include, exclude, include, exclude. And the United States has went back and forth during the history of this country, having time periods where, you know, give me, you're tired, you're poor, you're hungry, says the Statue of Liberty, where we've been very including. But we also have all these time periods where, you know, the racism, the nationalism, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, Donald Trump is coming through and just espousing what's there and making it conscious, Pluto, balsamic Pluto, to then have this Neptune transit to Mars say, how are we going to act? And the Neptune oppositions, and what are we going to choose to believe about ourselves as a country? I think we're in for major, major changes in this country, and I think this decade's going to be a wild ride. Historically, the late Robert Gover, who I worked with, he wrote a book called Time and Money. He was an astrologer. He says whenever outer planets hit the Mars Neptune square, we have financial downturns. Look what's happening. Neptune square Mars 5 times, Neptune oppose itself 3 times, and we've had this little virus come through and wipe out everything that has been a progressive gain over the last 3.5 years of Donald Trump. One of my other areas of interest, just personally, is the public banking movement. And I have free webinars on that on our YouTube channel. If you just want to go to our channel and search the keyword banking, I'm a strong advocate of the public banking movement. And I have been waiting for that to take off. Publicbankinginstitute.org, publicbankinginstitute.org. And my heroine is Ellen Brown, and her latest book is Banking on the People. She created, her website is webofdebt.com, webofdebt.com. and she is a co-founder of the Public Banking Institute. I also think with this chart here for the United States that we're just, as you watched, unlike Trudeau in Canada, the United States, the states started the cannabis legalization movement, and then it just took off on the grassroots level. I think we're going to see that same thing happen with the public banking movement, which is cities and states creating their own banks so that the interest goes back to the people for infrastructure. I won't get on to this. It's a favorite subject of mine. And so again, I will point you in to our YouTube channel, and you can research that yourself if it's something that you care to get interested in. Let me pause. Questions on any material? Here's my most recent one. Public webinars that I've done that are available for purchase off our website. Questions, comments on anything? 9 hours together. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question
Yes.
about the nodal axis? What if the uh, what if the ruler of your north node is conjunct your south node?
Ooh, when the ruler of the north node by sign or house
Mm,
is conjunct the south node, it means the ego is being pulled back into the past
okay.
to redo, review. There's
Mhm.
something that you've got to go back and heal
Okay.
emotionally. And that will be described by the planet that is conjunct the south node, and it will be described by the sign and house that the south node is in.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Other questions?
Hi, Kim. This is Julie.
Mm-hmm.
This was fascinating. I'm still processing a lot of this. I have a quick question just out of curiosity. Since we're all looking at planets versus planets as well as to the nodes, do you do aspects, to the angles of the house,
Yes.
chart at
Yes.
all? And
Yes,
what,
you can. Mm-hmm.
which direction would you go? Sort of like how,
Let's
um,
just go to the quickest chart I can show you, okay? All right. And so we're going to work with the smaller circle. All right. If you notice, if you pay attention, the ascendant changes degree typically every 4 minutes. So 4 minutes, 8 degrees Gemini, 4 minutes, 9 degrees Gemini. So the houses and the angles have a tendency to move clockwise like the nodes do. So you would start with the planet and then you'd go clockwise to the angle you wanted to compare it to. Does that make sense?
yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And yes, you can do that. Just a little more advanced astrology, and I just it's a great question to ask, but I thought I would maybe go too far with people in overwhelm. If we actually started to get into those examples.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's a lot to process already. Still trying to digest the
Yeah,
material.
let's just get through the 8 phases, please, and then I got to do it between all the planets.
Yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Next question.
So when you're doing a reading for somebody, do you do that difference listing for every chart that you would be doing with somebody, like their natal chart?
Yes, it saves you a buku amount of time because especially when as charts can very easily have their grids, okay, and it'll go applying and separating with the degrees and minutes, and you can start to learn to use that. But when you make that differential listing, then it really becomes easy to compare the faster moving planet to the slower moving planet by degree. because that differential listing in solar fire, it does moon to Uranus and it does Uranus to the moon. And so you'll find that those are just, 180 degrees of separation, really. But when then you look at it visually, you can grasp that phase, and then you know which one you really need to determine with degrees and minutes. And yes, it is quite helpful for that when you are working with natal chart interpretation, and you can tell there's some type of aspect there close. For those of you who work with charts, many in my 35 years of studying evolutionary astrology, I have watched, especially within this last decade, as more and more astrologers start to consider the whole cycle of phases and aspects. For instance, I don't know if I can grasp this really quick from my handout. Let me try and see if I've got this. I want you to just look right here. Here's Uranus at about 7 degrees Taurus, transiting in the sky. Here's Pluto over here at about 25 degrees Capricorn retrograde. Do you remember when Uranus made those 7 waxing first quarter squares to Pluto? We all remember that, 2012 through 2015. And, we were kind of all going, oh, wow, the crisis in action, change is going to come. Well, guess what Uranus and Pluto are doing now? 2019 through 2021. Uranus is making 7 first quarter phase biseptiles, the 103 degree mark, 102 degrees 50 minutes. Uranus is making 7 biseptiles to Pluto. 2019, 20, 21. I did a free class on that with EA Zoom. If you go to EA Zoom's webpage and search Uranus, you'll see my class with all the slides on that. Anybody see that in the calendars? Nope. And so, we're entirely missing that aspect right now, but it's Uranus and Pluto. How much more big of a power hitter do you need than those 2 planets? And I was looking for my printout of that one, but I don't seem to have it handy at the moment. So I think I wandered from the question. I hope. So yes, the difference listing for natal chart interpretation, but even following that with the slower moving outer planets is my point. Remember, septiles, fatedness, special destiny, Uranus to Pluto in first quarter phase, making those 7 biseptiles, realigning planet Earth, okay? Realigning planet Earth with its souls, Pluto, evolution, and the whole individualization or waking up process of Uranus. Next question.
Hi, Kim. It's Julie again. I almost forgot. There was a question about because you mentioned yesterday that participants can get local rates. Could you confirm the rate for your reading?
Sure. Yeah. For those of you who have attended this workshop or for, MMA, I am willing to do a reading for you at my local Black Hills rate, which is $100 US. My national rate is 150 US, but I am grateful for you letting me create this workshop, and I am grateful for co-ownership of it. And so that is my special for you in return. You would need to email us via the website or let's see, there's the phone number down below on your screen. So you can see our website, you can see the phone number down below. You're welcome to email us or call us to get something set up on a local basis.
And right, I did email your official email to everybody.
Sure, sure.
Uh,
Today's Sunday, right? Yep. Patient with us. I might take tomorrow off. And so, give us a few days into this next week. And Leroy's my scheduler. I am blessed with a partner who's not only my IT guy, he's also my secretary. And so he'll probably be the one that will either email you back or call you and get you set up in my schedule. Next question. So I will say to all of you, and I tell you what, let's get out of this and go back to here. For those of you who were kind of watching me, as I went through, I created 6 slides like this. And so we have 6 different recordings of these 9 hours together. And so you might want to give Leroy most of this week. He'll create 6 links for each section with the video link so you can literally watch it just like we did. He'll create an audio link that you can listen to it, and he'll create an audio download link so you can put it on your iPhone and walk the dog, as we say. So I will share all this with MMA, and I'll probably share it with one person, Julie, and then I'll let you guys share it amongst yourselves, because you will receive a copy of this so you can watch this more than once, because it's a lot to take in. However, it's a wealth of information that can really deepen your own charts understanding and evolve you with your own chart interpretations with clients. Anybody else? Oh, there is my chart. Hey, Chris, I forgot that we have our moon only minutes away from each other, soul sister. I remember that part. I didn't remember it was our moon that was connecting us.
Yes, Kim. That's right. Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this. This was really great. I hope the members all loved it and got to see you as you really are, a true trooper. Thank God for that Capricorn rising.
Yeah. Calms down all my 9th house energy. Yeah, and the Sag energy lightens up that Scorpio, huh? Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chris, for asking me, and thank you, everyone. I thoroughly enjoyed teaching. I was looking forward to a plane trip, but wasn't meant to be, so I'm grateful for technology in the world of astrology. I mean, look at how it has opened astrology up in general for so many of us. All right. Last call. Comments, questions?
Kim, I just would like to remind you there are a lot of thanks in the chat in case you missed them.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. We're in process of redoing our website. So we haven't updated it for 7 years, and with our YouTube purgatory that's now back, it really put us in, the Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto going over this ascendant of mine. See that 21.5 Capricorn? We've been in process of revamping our website. So if any of you would care to send me an email with endorsement comments, I would love it. you could show up on our website. So thank you, everyone. All right, I am going to shut off this recording.